Hello again, everyone. We are live on YouTube and LinkedIn here with another exciting episode of the Top Innovator Series. This is the place where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and of course, the brilliant minds behind them. My name is Joseph Martens, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest for today. With us is Greg Taffet. Greg is the fractional CIO of Cirrus Environmental Systems. In addition, he held several other tech executive roles in the past. And I don't often add non-work details to the introduction, but I was so fascinated this time that I want to make an exception here. Greg is also a scuba diver and a coral restoration expert. Greg, it's awesome to have you here with us today.
Glad to be here. Glad to join you.
Let's dive right into let's dive into the leadership conversation and talk about your leadership journey. You're clearly highly accomplished, have achieved a lot as a leader. And I'd be curious, when you reflect on that journey, Greg, what do you think are some of the reasons for that success? What do you think are the ingredients, secret or not, to the success that you've had?
It's always been wanting to really understand things, as opposed to just doing. And I tell my people right now that even if I tell you to do something, please do it. But if you don't understand it, please ask, so that you learn more about why we're doing this. And then you can be a better contributor because you understand what's going on, not just a rote programmer or analyst or whatever, So by understanding, it helps to, broaden your horizons.
Mm-hmm. And I take it understand means on a deeper level, right? It's not just understanding the how do I go about doing something, but the reason for it, like you said, and maybe a broader context of that.
Right, how we align with the business, how we align possibly with the department. One of the interview questions I always ask people that are going to start to work for me is, what do you know about our company?
Okay.
It's very important that they understand what we do,
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm curious. So this, the importance on understanding the context, understanding the business rationale, is that something that you always had, that you always paid attention to? Or was there a moment where you realized this is important? I really need to take a look at that, and I need other people to take a look at that.
Well, this has been ingrained in me. My father had a shoe store. And when I was growing up, I had to work in the shoe store. And it was like, well, why do you price things this way? Or, why are we doing this for this holiday? Trying to understand what his thinking was of why he did certain things, helped me learn the business better, and understand how to serve our customers better.
And how does it work with your team? Is it easy to convey that focus on the why? What's your experience there? Or are there some people who are really reluctant and they want to focus on more of the transactional side, more on the how do I get it done? Tell me about your experience.
Always some people that want to focus just on getting the job done. And I find that those people may be good for getting it done in the short term, but they many times leave out something that is necessary for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the job is not done until the documentation is done. A lot of people in IT want to just heads down, do their development work, and then move on to the next project.
Right.
Well, for the long term, for the benefit of the company, if somebody else can't pick it up, and run with it later on, then the project is not done.
And how do you get people to see that? How do you convey the importance on that?
It's very much ingrained in just the way we talk about a project, because in many cases people will just say, hey, I have this development project. Well, in our case, we have the user buy-in, the change management, the training of the customer, and then finally, the as-built documentation. And then the cleanup, the part that everybody likes to forget about. It's let's just
Yeah.
move on to the next one. You know,
Yeah.
but when you lay out the project initially, you make sure you have all those phases in there so that the expectations are set in advance, that they know these are all the things that make the project, and it's not just the development effort.
Yeah. And you're right. It's always more interesting or attractive to start something new, the shiny new object phenomenon, right? Instead of
Right.
completing something and finishing the last few percent of the job that needs to get done.
Yeah. Yeah. We want to make sure that people do that. Yes.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear more about some of the lessons that you've picked up during your journey. When you think of some of the mentors that you had, or the trusted advisors that you had, or the people who were important in your professional life, what was some advice they gave you? What is something that they shared with you that really resonated, or you discovered this is more true than I thought it was, or this is an aha moment at some point?
The as a CIO, we have to deal with lots of vendors and lots of contracts.
Mhm.
And the one line that I repeat all the time to everybody is that a contract is for the divorce, not for the wedding.
Wow.
And, there are so many people that look at the contract and say, oh, yeah, it's for X amount of dollars and they're going to deliver something. But all the stuff that when you're dealing with a contractor and they're doing what you like, you never look at the contract. You never care what it says. They give a little, you give a little, there's a compromise. It's only when something starts to go wrong that people look at the contract and say, oh, what did it say that we're going to do in this case? And half the contracts that I read don't have contingencies for what are we going to do in that case? Or, how do we solve this dispute? Or what's the detailed document that's the basis for this contract? And lawyers are great because they make sure that you put in all the there ises and the wherefores and the whys, but we have to look at the contract to make sure it covers the content that we want the contract to be about, because the lawyers don't have any clue about that information.
Yeah. This is a great insight. Contracts are written for the divorce, not for the wedding. Right? I love it. Because as long as we are able to talk, as long as the relationship's okay, communication is working, we can change it, right? We can agree to
Right.
something else. But once we can no longer talk to each other, that's when we need something.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes it either a divorce where we,
Yep.
debate a little bit and then go our different ways, or, hopefully don't wind up in court and don't wind up with lawyers.
Yeah.
You have a good contract, you can, use that to set the path to separation.
Yeah. Yeah. We keep talking about divorce, right, which is a painful experience, of course. So I'm curious, is this something you had to learn the hard way, or is this something that someone shared with you, it made sense, and you've adopted
One
it
of
therefore?
my early bosses, way back in my career, made me read contracts. And he
Okay.
explained this to me, and he was a contract expert also. And so that's where, just like everything else, the more you practice it, the more you learn what to look for. And the better you make your contract, the less likelihood there is of a problem.
Yep. Yeah, and you probably have the conversation up front as well, right? In order to put something in the contract, you need to have the conversation, and it
Right.
makes sure there is no forgotten conversation or ignored conversation or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
interesting. So these were some lessons from the past. I would love to look at today now and talk about where you are in your leadership now. When you look at where you are now, I'm curious, is there an area, or what area might it be, where you say, this is where I want to put some focus on. This is an area where I want to grow. This is an area where I want to learn something. Is there such a thing? And
I am always trying to learn something new. Um, right now there's a lot of discussion about AI There's a lot of discussion about digital transformations, and I am almost not concerned about AI anymore because I am more concerned about our software itself,
Okay.
and that it uses AI, and that it uses the right type of algorithms. And, it's just like the carpenter analogy. Um, I want my software not to use AI. I want it to use the right algorithm, whatever that happens to be, you know, and look at it and give me the advantage over somebody else who just says, well, everything is a nail. I'm always going to hit it with AI. You know,
Mm.
uh, I'm looking at it and saying, okay,
No, I got it.
is the software going to solve my problem?
Yeah.
Are they a forward-thinking company? Are they using AI appropriately in the software? And is it something that's going to evolve appropriately over time?
Yeah. Now you mentioned AI. Let's put it in a leadership context. Are you using AI from a leadership perspective in any way, and how do you use it at the moment?
I I use the chatbots, all the time.
Uh-huh.
And, I am also involved, as you mentioned in the beginning, with a coral restoration chatbot right now, which is in
Okay.
beta, you know.
Okay.
But, I look at all the different chatbots and I sometimes try to have Gemini compare with Copilot and look at the answers. And I find that the AI, it is still so evolutionary. It's gone past the revolutionary stage. Now everybody is just jumping on the bandwagon and creating something a little bit better, a little bit better here, a little bit better there.
Yep.
And looking at it not as a distraction anymore, but, as just as one of the functions in the software that we use. You know?
Yep. Yep.
And it's, in fact, I just did a presentation on AI, and I went to AI to say, what are the key things that I should talk about for this presentation?
When I talk about you, AI, right?
Right, yes, and
Yeah.
it was very
Uh-huh.
interesting, the answers it gave me.
Okay.
Um,
And that can be so surprising sometimes. And I want to bring up our pre-meeting that we had when we also talked a little bit about the coral restoration work that you do. I was fascinated to learn. I didn't know that before. Then more than 50% of the oxygen, I think you told me 70% even, is not created in rainforests or forests, but it's
right, 2 out of 3
created.
of the breaths that you take come from oxygen from coral reefs. Yep.
I was fascinated by that. And I'm going out on a limb and say, almost wherever we go and dive into a topic again, we're probably surprised by what we find. And the
Yes,
mm,
yes.
yeah. So let's take a look at the future now, Greg. I'd be interested to explore how you see the future or your future of leadership. Not asking about companies, I'm not asking about titles or positions or so, but I'm curious to know how you position you, how you see yourself in 3 years, 5 years in a leadership role. What is
I
different then? Mm-hmm.
I think of myself as a team builder.
Mm-hmm.
That is the primary thing that I bring to the table now, is the ability to assemble the right group of people to align with the business requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are so many tools, so many skills, and so many different levels of learning that people have, that to get projects accomplished, you really have to get the right people aligned. And it doesn't always mean that you need the top guns.
Yeah.
It also means that you need the people that are going to be happy doing the maintenance, the people who are going to be happy, um, with the daily monitoring, to make sure, because I certainly don't want to look at the same screen every day, day after
Right.
day. I would become bored. So I got to find the right person who's going to be able to do the day after day monitoring that we need done, you
Yeah.
know, and find the top guns that are going to handle the hard development problems and the tricky things as the business pivots. So building the right team is using different skills from different people and matching them all together into a jigsaw puzzle that creates a very productive whole,
Hmm.
you know.
So I'm curious, how do you do it? What are the tools you use? Is that something that you do intuitively, or are there some assessments, tools, or maybe AI that you use for that?
I really believe in just talking to people.
Hmm.
And before even meeting them, I don't like to be prejudiced by who they are. So even having a telephone conversation and making sure that we can talk to each other,
Mm.
having a dialogue to me has become much harder than it ever was before. There's so many people who are texting little thoughts
Okay.
and who are interested in, you know, getting something done quick is the opposite of looking at the whole of learning, what we need to do and then being able to contribute. Once they're on their path doing their specific function, it's fine. But I really like to assemble a team of people that we can all talk about the project, understand our roles, and then if they want to work in their own style, and after we all know what we're doing, then
Hmm.
whatever their style is, we can try to accommodate that and
Hmm.
get them to be as productive as possible. And my job then becomes to dance and distract all the distractors from bothering the team.
I like
You
it.
know,
I like the analogy. And it
you know,
also sounds a little bit like we're back to the beginning of the conversation, right? Where we also talked about creating context, getting to the deeper why of why the work's being done. And it sounds to me like that's what you're looking for in the conversations, right? Not just
right,
the immediate quick fix or quick answer to something, but
right.
a deeper connection as well.
Because when the team understands each other,
Hmm.
they know when to ask for help. They know who they can go to ask for help. And when there's a problem, we can go back and say, okay, how do we solve this
Yeah.
problem as a team? Not just let somebody be strung out on the ledge, trying to solve something themselves that, is
That,
the team could help with,
yeah.
and at the other side, when they're running at like a racehorse down the track, accomplishing stuff, well, then we want to just let them keep going, and
Mm.
keep accomplishing. And, as a manager and leader, you got to be able to recognize those two differences
Hmm.
and give your team what they need.
Yeah.
And as there's so many more technologies and so many more areas and tools, it's harder to know the tools. So as a leader, we have to know how to manage change, manage people, and manage our interface with the business, is the key thing here. You know,
Yeah.
of course, they
Yeah.
always want me to manage budgets too, but that's
That comes on top of that as well. Yeah.
right.
But yeah. Okay. Let me ask you one more question, just to wrap up. Tell me one thing where you think this is clear to you, you've discovered this in leadership, you recognize this is important, and at the same time you see many other leaders don't see it. For some reason, they don't have the experience, they're missing something, they don't see it. Is there something where you feel, I wish other people, other leaders would see that as well?
That is something that I always am challenged with, is because nobody knows what we do. And they think all IT people do the same thing.
Okay.
It's just you code that over there, you do this over there. And so they might go to one of my infrastructure people and say, can you write this application program? And they might go to my application person and say, I have a problem with my network. because they don't recognize the difference. And therefore, I am always working with our leadership team to try to explain the differences of the types of tasks and the risk that the company has if we don't do certain things. So my biggest concern with other leadership is not acknowledging the risk when they look at all IT people, as the same thing.
Yeah. Got it. So it's an educational component also, right? Making sure they see the full functionality that's there.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Greg, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure having you here. I will forever remember the contract for the divorce and not for the wedding. I love that. That was a really nice thought. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you.
To everyone else who's out there, thank you so much for joining us today. Please remember to like, subscribe, and join us again for our next podcast. And until then, make sure to keep your brain cells active.